What's up, everybody? I hope you're all having a great weekend. Welcome back to the channel for another episode of Ask Me Anything. Now, usually these videos come out on Mondays, but I'm not gonna lie, I literally thought today was Monday until like 5 minutes ago, and I already picked out all the questions. I already sat down to record, so screw it, we're gonna do this today. A lot of really good questions this week, a ton of fun things to talk about, so I'm not gonna waste any time. Let's jump right into this. The first question comes from Hugh Barkers, who says, okay, after the Leafs vs. Wings result, what do both teams do about their goaltending? That game last night was the most insane Red Wings game I have ever watched, and I mean, they've had some pretty insane games this season alone. Think about their first game of the year against Tampa Bay, the 7-6 loss, but 10-7, 17 total goals scored, making it 7-6 with like, I think 13 minutes to go in the third after starting the third down 7-2. That has to take the cake. I've really never seen anything like it. I feel like both fan bases, Red Wings fans, Leafs fans, can agree that both teams were losers last night despite the Leafs getting the 2 points. That had to be the worst display of defense and goaltending in a single NHL game from both teams that I have ever seen. The Leafs goaltending, especially in the third period, was ridiculous. What an absolute roller coaster of emotions that game was for both fan bases. And as far as your question goes, what should both teams do about their goaltending? I think for the Red Wings, you kind of just stick to the plan. Obviously, Nedeljkovic has had a very up and down season. He's in the midst of a pretty bad cold spell right now, but I feel like for the Red Wings, you're kind of just having placeholders in net until Sebastian Cossa is ready to make the leap to the NHL, which is probably still a couple of years away, so I think Nedeljkovic is still going to be the guy until then. And in the case of the Toronto Maple Leafs, it's a tougher question because obviously they're trying to win right now. They're going to make the playoffs, so they're going to need good goaltending when they get there, and Jack Campbell started the season so incredibly well. He was one of the Vezina Trophy favorites through the first 2 months, and over the past month and a half, his game has fallen off of a cliff. And in the case of Peter Mrazek, he's rarely ever healthy, and when he has been healthy, he hasn't been performing well. It's a really tough call. Do you go out and try to acquire a goaltender at the trade deadline with your newfound cap space with Muzzin on LTIR? Do you go after a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury? Or do you ride it out with Jack Campbell, who is really struggling right now, but for the most part of his time with the Leafs, he's been fantastic. So do you trust him to get his game back? It's a really tough call. It's going to be really interesting to see what the Maple Leafs decide to do. The next question we have comes from the Amazing Gamer 6736, who says, I feel like no one is talking about the season Zuccarello is having. He is on pace to shatter his career high in goals, assists, and points, and has easily been Minnesota's best player next to Kaprizov. This is a really good point. Zuccarello, I definitely feel like, is having an overlooked season. 53 points in 43 games, the best season of his career. Him and Kaprizov together are so fun to watch. They have such amazing chemistry, and it's awesome to see. Even though Zuccarello is 34, his game is aging incredibly well. I remember when he first signed the contract with the Minnesota Wild, $6 million per year, decent amount of term on it as well. I wasn't a huge fan of the deal at the time. I didn't really think Zuccarello was quite worth $6 million a season. I thought that it was too long for how old he's going to be, throughout the majority of the contract and when the contract ends, but I'm happy to say that I could not have been more wrong about that. The next question comes from Alex Donnelly, who says, should Gerard Gallant get nominated for the Jack Adams based on the Rangers' success, or is this team where they're at due to Shesterkin? I don't think Gerard Gallant's a bad coach by any means. I think he's done a good job with the New York Rangers. However, I don't really think he deserves to be in the Jack Adams conversation. I think a large part of where the Rangers are at is because of Shesterkin and his performance. The Rangers get outshot and outchanced a lot for a team that's where they're at in the standings and where they've been for the majority of this season. They're winning so many games because when Shesterkin's in net, he's just not letting in goals. Shesterkin is literally having one of the best seasons by a goaltender that we have ever seen, and when you have a guy like that in net, and then you have the likes of Panarin, Zibanejad, Kreider up front who are able to finish their chances when they get them, you're going to win a lot of games. Moving on now, this next question comes from James McKinnon, who says, should the Jets explore selling Scheifele and or Wheeler considering the situation they're in? Also love the content. Thank you for the support. I've said this a lot recently, but yeah, I do feel like it's time for Winnipeg to make a big change. They're not heading in a good direction. Mark Scheifele especially, it just doesn't seem like he's engaged when he doesn't have the puck. He's horrible defensively, doesn't backcheck a whole lot, and when you have a guy like that as your number one center and one of the leaders on the team, it doesn't really set a good example for the other guys in the lineup. So honestly, yeah, I do feel like maybe it's time for Winnipeg to look to trade Mark Scheifele. Blake Wheeler's kind of a different situation because I don't really know if you're going to be able to find a team that's willing to take on that contract. But in Mark Scheifele's case, a centerman who's scored around or above a point per game pace for basically his entire career, only makes a little over $6 million a season, and is signed at that cap hit through the 2023-24 season. That's a player a ton of teams would be interested in. The Jets could get a significant return for him. Now, do I think that's going to happen? Probably not, but I really feel like that is the direction the Winnipeg Jets should be headed in, because with this core, it just doesn't seem like they're going anywhere. The next question we have comes from Tom, who says, is Robertson the best forward from the 2017 draft? I know Pettersson is the consensus pick, but Robertson has 92 points in 94 games in the last 2 seasons, playing 1653 and 1745, and just keeps adding to his game. Love the content, by the way. Thank you for the support. If you've been subscribed to the channel, even just for this season, you know I'm a pretty big fan of Robertson's game. I said multiple times this year that I feel like he's one of the more underrated players in the league right now. And yeah, looking back at the 2017 draft, he definitely has a case to be the best forward from that class. I still think when you consider overall game, I'd go with Pettersson, but I'm definitely not going to argue with you and tell you that you're wrong if you think it's Robertson, because like I said, he definitely has a case. This next question comes from BarDownBreaks97, who says, with Woodcroft bringing a missing spark to Edmonton, do you see them becoming a real playoff threat? And again, thank you for the support. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't see Edmonton as a real playoff threat with Mikko Koskinen and Mike Smith as their 1-2 punch in net. If they go out and they get a goaltender at the deadline like a Marc-Andre Fleury, even somebody like Jonas Korpisalo, who I trust more than a Smith and a Koskinen, and seeing as what happened to the Oilers in the playoffs last year, it doesn't make me feel too confident about them this time around, because I mean, the team is still relatively the same. Sure, you have Zach Hyman, there's some new faces on the back end, but overall the defense still isn't good, the goaltending isn't good. I hope I'm wrong, because I want to see McDavid, I want to see Leon Draisaitl thrive in the playoffs and go on a deep playoff run, but with the roster they currently have, I just don't really feel confident in that. The next question we have comes from Ben, who says, does Thomas Hertl sign an extension with the Sharks, or do they trade him at the deadline? I really feel like he is going to end up getting traded. For the first couple months of the season, it looked like the San Jose Sharks, may be able to be in the playoff hunt for the majority of the season, but they've kind of fallen off. I don't think they're a real threat to make the playoffs. The team is just overall still not very good. I feel like the best thing for the Sharks' future would be to move on from Hertl. Even if he wants to come back and sign an extension, I think it's time for the Sharks to move in a different direction, and that direction should be to head towards a rebuild. And I know that's hard to do with the likes of Karlsson, Burns, and Couture making so much money and there's so much term left on their deals, but I just don't see a point in hanging on and being a mediocre team, which is actually the perfect segue to the next question from Septicat3268, who says, with the Wild finally out of mediocrity, which team do you feel took their place? And thank you for the support. I really get the feeling that it's going to be the San Jose Sharks, mostly because I just don't feel confident in their front office accepting the fact that their team is not very good and heading towards a rebuild and actually embracing it. I feel like they're going to hold on to some of their veteran players, which in reality, they don't have much of a choice. They have to hold on to Erik Karlsson. You're not trading that contract. I mean, maybe you could move Logan Couture, but for the next 3, 4, 5 seasons, I feel like the Sharks are kind of just going to be the team that they are this season, and that is just mediocre at best, because they still have so many veteran players that make so much money and have so much term left on their deals that are still good players, but they're not great anymore, but they're good enough to make it so that your team isn't completely awful. I'm sure you guys get what I'm saying. The next question comes from Zach Goddard, who says, do you think Troy Terry will keep his production level up for the next seasons, or is this a one-season wonder? Personally, I hope he keeps it up, and I'm not even a Ducks fan. Keep up the good work. This is a pretty interesting question. I don't think Troy Terry is going to be a guy who scores at like a 40-goal pace every season, but I do think he's going to be a very good player for a very long time. Even throughout his first couple seasons in the NHL, when he wasn't producing that much, his underlying numbers were still very good. You knew he had a ton of skill. He had some dominant seasons after being drafted in the NCAA, obviously had big moments in the World Juniors. So although this season may be a career year for Troy Terry, he's probably never going to have another season in his career where he has, what was it, like a 16-game point streak or whatever it was. But I really do feel like Troy Terry's a guy that'll still be a perennial 20-25 goal scorer for the Ducks. Next up, this question comes from Hatcher Kane, who says, I know you've talked about this, but is JT Miller really going to be traded? I just can't see the Canucks retooling their squad once again. I think with JT Miller, it's all just going to come down to if they get an offer they can't refuse. I don't think they're going to be in any kind of rush to trade him, especially at this year's deadline. Obviously, they're going to have a lot of time to do it if they're serious about it in the upcoming offseason. But yeah, I really just feel like it's all going to come down to how much is the team willing to give up for JT Miller. I don't think the Canucks feel like they have to trade JT Miller. I'm sure they'd have no problem holding on to him. He's been great for them. Next up, this question comes from Dankius Memius Maximus III. What a name. Is Austin Matthews actually underrated regarding his defensive game takeaways? Should he be up for the Selke? This is a really good good question, and I do feel like the defensive aspect of Matthews' game is incredibly underrated, and naturally I feel like that's going to happen when you're probably the best goal scorer on the planet. Most of the focus is going to be about your offense and your goal scoring. That's what the majority of people are going to talk about when they bring out Matthews and are talking about his game, but yeah, this season he's been one of the best defensive forwards in the league, so I definitely think 1000% Matthews should be up for the Selke Trophy this season if he continues to play like this to finish out the year, and also he should probably be one of the finalists for the Hart Trophy at this point in the season, considering what he's doing at both ends of the ice. This next question comes from a name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but you can see on the screen. What do you think about Laine? Is he going to get traded? I don't see Columbus moving Patrick Laine, I really don't, especially after the way he's played over the past month and a half. He's been one of the hottest players in the National Hockey League. His point streak just ended, but I really feel like this season Laine has proven to everybody that he can still be that player that he was, in his first 3 seasons in the NHL, and that is be one of the more lethal offensive wingers in the league. And even though it feels like Patrick Laine has been in the league forever now, he's still only 23. I feel like this is a guy Columbus is definitely going to hold on to and try to build around. Moving on now to the next question. This one comes from Larry. If New York Rangers are going to do trade before deadline, who do you think they should use as asset, Kakko or Lafreniere? I'm actually going to say neither of those guys. Ideally, I feel like if you're the Rangers, even if you want to make a big move at the deadline, you probably still want to hold on to both of those guys, and I feel like they could easily because they still have so many other good assets and so many other good prospects that should be appealing to other teams. Just naming a few, obviously guys like Brennan Othman, Vitaly Kravtsov, Nils Lundqvist, still have a majority of their draft picks, even have younger guys that are already in the lineup like a Filip Forsberg. I really don't think the Rangers should have any problems still being one of the more active teams at the deadline and potentially getting one of the bigger rentals available while still holding on to both Kakko and Lafreniere. Moving on, this comes from the Fexican. Would you sign Sean Avery to an ECHL contract if you had the power? Absolutely not. If you guys don't know, the Orlando Solar Bears of the ECHL actually signed him, I think last week or something. He lasted all of 2-3 days and then they released him. I really feel like that was kind of just a publicity stunt. I don't feel like they ever had intentions of actually using Sean Avery in a game. I'm really not a big fan of Sean Avery. He's kind of weird. I just don't really understand his motives sometimes. He'll be posting videos on his Instagram or Twitter just completely bashing on a player. Most recently he did it to Clayton Keller. For some reason he's just a complete hater of Clayton Keller, so he's really not someone I want to associate myself with. This next question comes from Zogos, who says, which team do you think acquires Forsberg at the deadline if he is dealt? I wanted to mention this because I made a video talking about Filip Forsberg and the trade rumors a couple of days ago, and then shortly after that David Poile came out and said they're not shopping Filip Forsberg and they don't have any intentions on trading him, so it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So I just wanted to include that in this video for all the people that's seen the Filip Forsberg trade rumors video a couple of days ago, just to kind of give you an update on that. Next up, this question comes from Blasphemy, who says, third week asking best nickname in the NHL. I definitely have to go with Pasta. I just think it works so well. David Pastrnak, his nickname's Pasta. There's restaurants that give out free pasta when David Pastrnak scores a couple of goals, I think. Obviously, there's the pasta emoji that you can use, on your phone if you're tweeting about Pastrnak. I think it's just perfect. This next question comes from Ian Patterson, who says, which team is the biggest surprise buyer? I'm going to say the LA Kings. In my bullet predictions video to start the season, I actually said I think the Kings are going to make the playoffs, but I didn't think they'd be this good and be a team that's actually out there actively buying at the deadline. I believe that's what the Kings came out and said. Their intentions are not to be selling, they're likely going to be buying, and I think it may be time to actually make an entire video on the Kings. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow or the next day, but they're quietly second place in the Pacific right now, ahead of Vegas. This next question comes from Nicholas Spears, kind of stretching rules, but would you rather the season end soon due to COVID probably not happening and Detroit play in the play-in round, or the season end and Detroit misses? I'm just going to say the season continues as it's going right now and Detroit misses the playoffs. When they make it eventually, I want them to make it the real way. I don't want them to get in like a 21 team or 24 team format or anything like that. And I definitely don't want this season to end prematurely, so I definitely have to go with the second option. This next question comes from Harold Schniffer, who says, which team needs the first overall pick the most? I really feel like there's only two right options here, and it's Arizona and Montreal. Neither of those teams really have an absolute blue chip prospect that's not on their NHL team right now. I like Dylan Guenther, but I really don't view him as a franchise altering player. And in Montreal's case, obviously Cole Caulfield is great, but he's already on the NHL team. I'm talking about prospects that haven't made the NHL yet. So I really feel like it comes down to either of those teams that really need the first overall pick the most. And now for the final question of the video, this comes from the not so sad Rangers fan, And what sort of moves do you see the Rangers making? I'm guessing you mean like leading up to the deadline. I definitely feel like they need a top 6 forward. I feel like their top 6 has kind of been missing, one more piece. I love Kaapo Kakko, and even when he's in the lineup, he's usually in the top 6, and then you have a top 6 of Chris Kreider, Kaapo Kakko, Lafreniere, Panarin, Strome, and obviously Zibanejad. But I feel like if you're a team with Stanley Cup aspirations, which I think the New York Rangers definitely have this year, I feel like you need one more veteran piece. You don't want to put so much pressure on guys like Kakko and Lafreniere. I think they're really going to be active in terms of trying to acquire a top 6 forward. It was rumored that they're interested in JT Miller. I think he would be an amazing fit. Filip Forsberg is another guy who I think would be an amazing fit, but like I just said earlier in the video, it doesn't seem like Nashville's actually going to move him. But yeah, that's what I think the Rangers are most likely going to do, try to acquire a top 6 forward, and I think that's a move they definitely should try and make. So that is going to wrap up today's episode of the Ask Me Anything series. I really hope you guys all enjoyed. Thank you so much to every single one of you who took the time to go and leave a comment on the post. I really appreciate all of you guys. I read all the comments, even though I can't feature them all in the video. If you enjoyed today's episode and you want to see another one next week, then be sure to drop a like on this video. That is the best way to show your support. And if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.